This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
This week on Off the Record, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools versus the town of Matthews. The town wants to build its own charter schools, but CMS says that'll cost you. Also, City Council votes to spend money on affordable housing, but affordable to whom? Plus, Charlotte cops talking about pay raises and what they might do if they don't get those pay raises. Sports Illustrated talking about the Panthers and not about their draft choices. And take a ride on the Blue Line extension. Please. We'll find out where all the riders are and why mechanics think there might be a problem with light rail safety. Off the Record's next on PBS Charlotte. Hi, I'm Jeff Sonier, and this is Off the Record, where we talk about the stories that you've been talking about this week. And if you watch the news, read the news, or listen to the news, you'll recognize the names and the faces around our table this week. Let's welcome Dedrick Russell from WBTV and Mark Becker from WSOC-TV. Also, Steve Harrison from the Charlotte Observer and Jonathan Lowe from Spectrum News. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you at home for being with us as well. And let's start first with the school issue. We've heard a lot about Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, versus Matthews. And while it's not a new issue for the towns to talk about breaking away from CMS, this is the first time that the discussion has gotten as far as a bill that's already passed the House in Raleigh and it is set to go to the Senate in a couple of weeks. Let's start with you, Dedrick. Been kind of a butting heads kind of a situation between the town and the board.
Exactly, and also in that House Bill 514, Mint Hill is also included.
Right.
I talked to the mayor of Mint Hill, and Mint Hill also supports House Bill 514. So CMS is on the defensive. They believe that this bill is bad for education, and it will set a precedent, and it will be a historical move if it does pass the Senate, because if that happens, then Cornelius could do it. Huntersville could do it. And then the CMS believes that you'll have school districts who have and school districts who have not. So that's why they're fighting this to the end.
And what we're talking about is the opportunity for a town like Matthews or Mint Hill to spend their own tax dollars to fund their own charter schools and to take kids out of CMS schools that are there now and put them in their hometown schools, if you will.
Exactly. But when you talk to the parents in Matthews and Mint Hill, they say that they're pleased with the schools in CMS. And so CMS is saying that, well, where is this coming from? Because, the schools in Matthews and Mint Hill are pretty good. You have Independence, Butler, Elizabeth Lane, Matthews Elementary. So, but commissioners are saying that, hey, this is something that we want to do. And it's so interesting that the commissioners say that, hey, if this bill passes, we won't enact it because people like CMS. But if you do us wrong, CMS, then that is when we will enact that bill. And CMS is saying that shows that this is all about politics. This is not about improving education. If you're going to try to hold that over our heads, that if we obey you, you won't enact House Bill 514. So a lot of drama there, and a lot of tension there.
There's a lot of history too, right? I mean, CMS being the large unitary school district it is, and there are many cities around the country. I'm familiar with St. Louis, for example. That area where St. Louis has a series of small districts, and you move into that district, and what happens is you have chosen selective segregation. And that's the concern here, of course, is that this is, I think it was James Ford, who was once Teacher of the Year, wrote this very pointed op-ed piece in the Charlotte Observer saying, we'd be building white fences
exactly
around school districts.
Yeah.
And resegregation is the tremendous underlying concern if and when that were to happen.
Yeah, but you have school board member Sean Strain, who says that House Bill 514 has nothing to do with segregation, but you have his other colleagues saying that it does, because when you look at Matthews, it's like, 82% white. Yes. So, so you're talking about if they leave, CMS, then you'll have schools that, that are not as diverse.
And I absolutely believe there is precedent that is at stake here, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It was interesting to hear you say, Dedrick, what the constituents, if you will, were saying and what the community reaction. I mean, we've heard a lot from the school board members and CMS officials and Matthews officials, but I'm just curious, what is the appetite among the users?
Well, they're going to have a town hall meeting.
We're going to find out very quickly.
CMS is going to have a town hall meeting to educate all parents in the Matthews Mint Hill area about House Bill 514 and what this means. Last week, town commissioners had a meeting and they had a public hearing. And the majority of the parents who approached Matthews Town Commissioner said that please do not go along with House Bill 514. I think like 13 people spoke, 12 spoke against 514, one person spoke for 514, and then what was the vote? It was a 4-3 vote to go and support House Bill 514. Very interesting.
What's been interesting is also how candid, if you will, the comments have been from both the board members and the town board members in Matthews. I mean, essentially, CMS is in many ways accusing the town board in Matthews of misleading or either misleading their voters or kind of changing the rules to fit the narrative here. And it's interesting also that the mayor of Matthews is a former CMS school board member, so there may be some old scores to settle here. He was, he knows the inside of CMS and how it works, and obviously he's using some of that inside knowledge in this particular push for House Bill 514.
And CMS came back. I was just going to say they came back pretty quickly and kind of re-raised and said, "Okay, if you guys move forward, we'll take all the kids out of Providence and we'll ship them back to Butler." I mean, it really got heated pretty quick. Yeah.
They had a meeting about a week and a half ago. I know Dedrick was working the daytime, but they had a nighttime meeting with both CMS board and Matthews Town Commissioners. The mayor and Mary McCray were sitting right beside each other, and was also almost kind of awkward to hear Mary McCray essentially saying, "We've never heard that you all have any issues. We have never heard that you all have these problems. Why don't you all just call us?" And it was almost kind of awkward to see that, have y'all not had this communication before? Where did this all come about? So
usually these sorts of things are done behind closed doors. It's very interesting to watch this discussion, this kind of moving around happening before the cameras, in front of the reporters, and
it's almost like
the public.
Like a gangster move because that's what they're, because Matthews, they're saying that, hey, our main concern is that during CMS's reassignment, student assignment, it's a priority that CMS wants to make schools more diverse. Right. So when you say that, does that mean busing? Does that mean you're going to take kids from Matthews and you're going to ship them all the way over to another school to make diversity happen? So, Matthews Town Commission say, hey, do not mess with our Matthews students. We want our Matthews students to stay right here in Matthews. So the CMS, they came back and they said that, it is not our desire to take Matthews students and, take them all the way across town. That's not what we want to do. We're not going to do that. But we can't promise that for future school board members. And Matthews Town Commissioners wanted CMS to say, you promise me that you will not do this.
Because in the last redistricting last year, it was pretty unscathed, right? There wasn't a lot of action.
Exactly.
But there was fear going in that there would be changes that would affect those Matthews schools, which probably planted the seed for where we are today.
CMS said we just can't make that promise because we can't hold that to future school board
And the
members.
next time, Matthews is going to be holding that bill in their hands if it passes the Senate and say, do what you want,
That's
but
a gangster move
we'll
right
do
there.
what we have to do as well. So,
Does anybody know what the governor thinks about this? He would have to sign it,
question I
right?
have is, what does the school superintendent think about this? I haven't heard anything from Clayton Wilcox
he recused
yet.
himself at that meeting.
That's interesting. We went and talked with him before, about a year ago this time, before he took the job, and I asked him the specific question, what are your thoughts on charter schools, and in particular public charter schools? And this is exactly what he said. I've said all along that I believe in competition. I'm not afraid of competition. I understand that one size doesn't fit all anymore, so there's a piece of me that says charter schools are going to be a piece of our landscape. If people are choosing to go somewhere else, that's really saying to us that our schools are not worthy of someone's children, and that's not acceptable. What he's essentially saying before he takes the job is that bring on the competition. We think that we can make our schools good enough to resist that kind of competition, and we'll make parents want to come here. But, welcome to Charlotte-Mecklenburg, welcome to Matthews, and welcome to the dynamics of, families and students and parents versus school board members versus town board members. I mean,
But I think one thing that's the sticking point is that, Matthews, if they do create their own charter school, this charter school will probably be exclusively for students in Matthews because they'll get to pick, choose, and refuse. So CMS is saying that, hey, we're going to spend public dollars for a school district that's exclusively for people in Matthews, opposed to having a charter school that's open for everybody. So so that is they have concern about that.
Yeah, and I don't know the inner workings of this. Maybe you guys do. Can they do that? Can they say only residents of Matthews in a charter school? It's a public school.
Part of the bill is part of the bill says that if the schools are overcrowded, that you can use a in-town preference over a lottery. The way the state law is written now, that if a charter school has more applicants than it has space, they have to go to a lottery system. This bill would exclude or exempt Matthews and Mint Hill from that part of the law and allow them to give first chance, front of the line status to the people in their town.
And so, and that's what CMS said. That's just not. That's not right. That's not right.
Yeah.
I think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
One other quick school issue that I want to touch on is the protest over sex education this week. I don't know how much of a protest there actually was, but interesting that some parents, some groups from the outside are criticizing how CMS teaches sex education.
I mean, 30 to 40 people stood in the pouring, driving rain on Monday. So, and we asked CMS how many students sat out on this past Monday. They gave us numbers, and there were more students out this past Monday than the previous Monday, but CMS doesn't publicize or put out why a student is absent, so couldn't really correlate the two, but it is worth noting. So they had this national sit-out. It was a national movement. I think it happened in Austin as well. This program, or parents and NC Values Coalition, was mainly the driving force behind the sit-out and the news conference on Monday, basically going after this, I believe it's the Welcoming Program.
Right, it's a Welcoming Schools program, which basically is a way, supposedly, according to the program, to make schools safer for LGBTQ students.
Giving teachers resources on how to, if they have an LGBT student, things that the teacher can do and help them in that process. And so parents saying that, using words like promiscuous, graphic, as far as their child having to have conversations that maybe the parent is not.
What did the group call it?
with.
Graphic, gender-bending, promiscuity, promoting sex education. That's in a word or in a phrase, I suppose that kind of encapsulates what they're concerned about.
And I think it points out, we talk about what's happening in Matthews and elsewhere. And this, I mean, things we can discuss on some level, but you get kids involved and emotions start going into play, and the stakes are higher.
Right.
And in one case, the student that wasn't comfortable with the lesson and said, I don't want to do that, and was asked to leave class. So,
and one thing to remember is that CMS does allow parents to opt out of sex education. And so while there is a protest about using the program in the first place, there is an option for parents who can, if they do object on a personal level, they don't necessarily have to have their kids involved in those sorts of lessons. So I suppose it's how long have they been talking about sex education?
And so I suspect that's something that's a bump in the road that will be discussed. That's not going to change the landscape like this.
And I guess they're also against that multiculturalism policy that was passed last year that will allow teachers to use curriculum, whatever they need to do in order to help teach a child who may be different from others. But one thing, parents just have to learn probably how to fight these things, because instead of protesting after they have voted on something, they need to come in on the front end, that when we start first introducing this policy, to bring your objections up early instead of waiting until the final reading of a policy.
I think the parents are learning.
Exactly. You have to.
Yeah, and it's a lesson learned in Matthews, I suppose, right now. Let's switch gears and talk about City Council this week. A couple of interesting issues on their, not necessarily on their agenda, but that wound up before them. In particular, affordable housing. We've talked about affordable housing for the last couple of weeks. This is really the first time the City Council has cast a vote, though, recently. Tell us a little bit about that, Steve.
So that's right. So right now at the city, affordable housing is for them, the most important issue, the second most important issue, third most important. And there was a vote Monday on approving projects from their housing trust fund. This happens about every year, but it became a much bigger deal this time. And what's happened is there is a group of council members who are saying, wait a minute, are we doing this the right way? And the debate is over whether to spend money that targets kind of the very poorest residents.
The
People
poorest of
earning,
the poor, if you will.
people
Yeah.
making minimum wage, making $8 an hour. And so the city has kind of targeted them, but the city has also spent a lot of time and money in the past on people making 80% of area median
Right.
income. And so you had, for the first time, this new council that came in November, and you had 3 of the members, Justin Harlow, Tarek Bakari, and who was else?
Larkin?
Larkin. Well, no, Larkin actually was with staff, but we had 3 members who kind of said, wait a minute.
Matt Newton was the other.
Yeah, Matt. I'm sorry. And so they said, I don't know if we're really doing this right. And they kind of descended. And then Mayor Lyles really got,
Snap back.
yeah, really did. So,
Yeah,
So you use the
and
word rebuked, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
the quote I
That's
pulled
old
from
school.
quote I pulled from your story was, "Are we spending money not to solve the problem?" And the concern is that a lot of the dollars that are being spent are not for the poorest of the poor, but for that, I guess, what would you call them, working poor, or families that are making more than the absolute minimum, but also need the help that affordable housing provides. And I guess those council members who voted against this are saying that we should spend our first money and our most money on the people who need it most and are at the lowest levels. But that's not always easy, because it's hard to get developers to build housing for those poorest of the poor. And that's the dilemma, I suppose, that city council's in right now.
It's very expensive to do 30% or below the area median income. It's very hard. There tends to be more opposition from neighbors. But kind of the issue is the city, they've had consultants who've come in and said, you actually have a surplus of housing for people who can afford it, making like $42,000 for a family of 4 and above. We have, the idea is we have plenty. So and then some people say, so why are we spending more? And the city comes back and says, well, there are people who make more money who choose to live in those units, making them unavailable. But it's just interesting for the first time just to see a minority kind of say, like, push back and say, wait, are we doing this the right way? Does this make sense?
It's interesting to watch this new city council and the dynamic with some of the old hands at City Hall, like Mayor Lyles and the staff, for that matter, as well. That's been a lot of the question, I suppose, people who watch City Hall is, are these new members going to be guided by the folks who've been there, or are they going to go off on their own and kind of, they're kind of viewed as new blood, but will they really bring new ideas and a new dynamic to the whole discussion? I think in this particular issue, the short answer is yeah.
That's
they
right.
are.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see.
Yeah. You also talked about at City Council the Blue Line extension and who's not riding it, or how many people aren't riding it. That's something else you touched on this week, Steve.
So the Blue Line extension opened March 16th. So CATS released not a lot of data. The first 2 weeks of ridership. I expect it will grow. More people will come. But it was about, the extension itself was about 9,000 new riders on a weekday. They kind of thought for the first year there'd be about 18,000. So that'll grow.
Yeah.
There'll be more
Yeah.
people that'll come. But there is a problem across the country, and in particularly in Charlotte, about transit, that people are not taking it. The bus ridership has plummeted, streetcar has plummeted. The Blue Line has actually done okay, but there's whether it's from Uber, Lyft, dockless bikes, cheap gas, something's going on. People are not
one thing
doing
that
it.
you will see, though, while those numbers will likely come up, you don't have the boost on Saturdays on the other days of the week. That you see that increase in ridership that you see on Saturday. You just don't have that on the other days of the week.
Yeah, and that's probably the UNCC factor for the Blue Line
Right.
extension. You've got college kids coming to and from uptown, but during the week, I guess the question is, before the development comes, do we have too much train and not enough riders for, to serve commuters?
And
the
too many.
basic
Well,
kind of
again,
the lifeblood of these lines.
If you build it, they will come. But I think Jeff has me on the show because I've been here a while. And the historic perspective, I don't know if you guys were around when the first part of the Blue Line opened up. It was right after Hurricane Katrina. Gas prices were $4 plus. And the ridership projections were out there. We're going to have, I don't remember, 25,000, by X number of years. It boomed right off the top.
It did.
Because gas was crazy. It was one of the first big panics we had. I remember going to top off every chance you got because there was a gas shortage. But they certainly were. We were victims then of the fluctuation in gas prices. Now gas prices are low, right? I think that's the key. I mean, people are driving. People are, if you have a car, and many do. So those who can make that choice are choosing to get in their cars. It's gas going back up. It's edging back up toward $3. In some places, the premium's over $3. So it may get back.
And it's all about that competition because, as you said, Lyft
Yeah,
and Uber, it's all about convenience. Why walk across the train track and buy a ticket when I can just use my phone and someone can come right to my door and pick me up and take me right
to where I want to go. Yeah.
And I think too the Blue Line, the extension, when you get up to University City, it's pretty congested, or like there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people there. But if you get off at like 25th Street or the Parkwood station, right now this will change in the future.
Absolutely.
There's just no one there.
Yeah.
There's, on the one side is the old huge Norfolk Southern rail tracks, so that's kind of a dead zone. And then the other side, there's just not. So this is really, I think, a long-term. This is like water and sewer lines. We'll see what happens in 20 or 30 years.
And it's important to point out, to Steve's point, is on the southern part of the extension, you've got that huge parking right at 485.
And you're right at 485,
Correct.
where the line begins. That's not the
But
case on
here,
the extension.
the last parking right is J.W. Clay.
Right.
And
that's a haul from 485 to
Correct.
where you have to drive to get to the
and that's
train.
not
So,
even where it ends. The main station on that end is UNCC. I live in that part of town and have ridden and parked at that station. Parking is a challenge there because if you're a visitor, you're not a student, you're not a staff member. They have a parking deck, but it's full of students. So figuring out the parking and the parking decks, there are 4 of them on the northern end. 2 of them, most times when I ride through there, are completely empty. So
that you'd
we'll
assume
see.
would change eventually too. By the way, one other item, ironically, while we're talking about low ridership, the fact that there are more trains has some of the mechanics complaining about having not enough mechanics to service those trains that are on the line and in some cases running empty.
That's right. At City Council 2 weeks ago, one of the, there's about, I think, 25, 27 light rail mechanics. He came and spoke before council and said, look, we are overwhelmed. We did get some new staff for the extension, but we are just crushed with trying to keep the trains on time.
Because they added the amount of trains, right?
That's right. They did add, so you have like double the number of vehicles. They run them pretty frequently now at rush hour, so there's just less downtime. He says that the streetcar, the old replica streetcars, are always breaking down. They have to spend a lot of time on those. And so he was kind of making a plea to the city, like, we need more people. We need to raise our pay so our people don't leave.
Yeah, but what we really need is more mechanics to keep up with the workload
That's
itself.
right.
Yeah. And again, those trains, whether they're full or empty, they're still running and they still need maintenance and that could potentially become a safety issue according to the union mechanics who are working on it. Also at City Council, the police have for weeks and months now been talking about pay raises, but this is their last opportunity this week, was their last chance to talk to the council directly before we see what the new budget looks like. And there were a lot of police officers at the city council meeting on Monday night.
And we got hold of an internal memo from the police, within the police department, suggesting that you're not going to get that 15% pay raise. Keep it real, that you want. And it suggested that there were some discussions in the police department with the chief, and the chief was very candid, but there were some very angry and pointed questions toward him about about what they're asking for, and the benefits is a huge part of this too. Their benefits package, which was changed up significantly. It's going to cost them a lot more money out of pocket. But nobody ever gets everything you want in a negotiation, right? I mean, I think that's how you have to approach it. They're asking for 15%, and the chief, I think, is probably keeping it real. It's just not going to be 15%, but there will be some. Yeah. They promised there would be some.
There was I think, an interesting moment. The city council, they have these budget retreats leading up to the final budget, and they will get in the weeds on some issues, just like crazy debate, getting in the manager's business about stuff. And then there was this moment where Ed Driggs, one of the council members, said, we need to have another meeting and really kind of talk about police raises and how much we think they should get. We need to kind of, this is a big deal.
Right.
And so, we kind of need to, he was saying, we need to give direction to the manager. And then council was like, no, that's not our job. That's it. Because they didn't want, there'll be disappointment. They didn't want to be
The bad
kind of
guy.
responsible. They don't want to be the bad guys. So it was like, well, we'll spend 2 hours talking about a 1% increase in stormwater fees, but police say like, no, that's not our job.
Welcome to Charlotte City
Yeah.
Council.
It wasn't just the, just to add this in there, it wasn't just police, though, this week. It was also firefighters that
Right.
were asking for.
Well, it is
some
budget
changes to
time,
their
so you
retirement
expect that.
benefits
But
as
again,
well.
you know, the
Time
police
for the wish
talk about
list.
the pay is so low that they're not talking about taking job action. They're talking about leaving the city and going to other police jobs. And so I guess that's ultimately the issue that the city may have to deal with wherever this
that gangster
police
movie you're
raise
talking
winds up. Yeah. Hey, we got a few minutes left, and I want to talk just a little bit about the Panthers. Sports Illustrated reporting again this week about the investigation, talking to the victim that they originally quoted in their first stories, and a lot more detail that really nobody really wants to hear about if you're a Panthers fan regarding the kinds of things that Jerry Richardson is accused of. I guess the two questions I have are, does this hamper or change the timetable for the sale? And, you know, just image-wise, you know, the Panthers are considered a good franchise, but boy, oh boy, this is something you just don't want to be talking about on draft night or any other night when, you know.
One thing that
focus
was
is on.
big on social media when this came out also was talking about non-disclosure agreements and how rampant they may be within the NFL, and having possible victims, but also having NDAs, and
Right.
can those victims talk? And
You know,
got there
I
heated.
think in answer to your question, will it affect the timetable? I'm not sure, but I kind of doubt it. I think that's all about business, right? The timetable of the sale and the bidders that are out there.
Yeah.
But the image, absolutely. You know, in the near term anyway. I mean, I heard earlier today Tom Brokaw had been accused
Right.
of something that had happened. You know, so it's hardly just the Panthers, but it's the world we live in, and there is an image concern.
And
of
I would
course.
think that the sooner the sale is completed, the quicker
better.
this is
Yeah,
off the table
sure.
and maybe out of the headlines. And that may be
Sure.
ultimately what the Panthers and the NFL want anyway.
It was-
Hey, we are out of time, folks. I'm sorry. As usual, we need a longer show, or we need fewer topics, or we just
we need to
shut
shut up, yeah.
There is always another show. And we gotta
Or
keep that in
$1
mind.
to shut up.
But anyway, thank you for joining us this week. Thank you, panelists. We'll see you next time on Off the Record.
A production of PBS Charlotte.